They called it victory, but when the smoke cleared, the faces were gone. Entire units wiped from existence, not by bullets but by what followed. Hunger, cold, silence. For every battle won, a dozen souls were lost long after the shooting stopped. No medals, no headlines, just forgotten graves buried under the word victory. Most who watch never subscribe, but if you believe these stories should never be forgotten, hit that button. Because what comes next is the part of victory history tried to erase. The sound comes first, a rolling thunder of artillery, so constant it blurs into a single roar. The ground trembles, the sky flashes, and the air smells of cordite and burning flesh. It is July 1944, Normandy. A young American soldier crouches in a foxhole, his helmet pressed against his ears. He's not afraid of dying. He's afraid of surviving, because those who crawl out of this battlefield alive will never be the same. This is the story we rarely tell about war. Not the medals, not the victories carved into marble, but the price paid in silence, in blood, in bodies broken long after the shooting stops. This is the hidden cost of victory. To understand this cost, we go back to June 6, 1944, D-Day. The Allies storm the beaches of Normandy. By nightfall, they have secured a fragile foothold in Nazi-occupied France. The headlines trumpet triumph. What the headlines do not capture is the staggering butcher's bill. On Omaha Beach alone, nearly 2,000 Americans fall within hours. The 116th Infantry Regiment, Virginia National Guard, farm boys, mechanics, clerks, loses nearly an entire generation in the first waves. Captain John Spaulding of Company A recalls watching his men vanish into surf-stained red. The sea, he wrote later, looked as if it had been turned to wine. For the survivors, the battle does not end with the beach. It only begins. Those who push inland find themselves in the bocage country of Normandy. Dense hedgerows, ancient earthen banks lined with thick brush. Tanks cannot pass, artillery cannot see. Every lane becomes a kill zone. Here the war slows to a crawl. Units advance mere yards a day, fighting for each field, each farmhouse. The official histories will record this as tactical brilliance, the grinding attrition that wore down German resistance. But for the men in those hedgerows, the price is unbearable. Private First Class Edward Doherty remembered Normandy not for the liberation of France, but for the stench. The dead could not be buried fast enough in the summer heat. We lived with them, he said. We ate with them. They were always there. At the top, generals drew arrows on maps. Eisenhower, Montgomery, Bradley. They debated speed versus caution, supply lines versus risk. Each choice carried consequences, measured in thousands of lives. Take Operation Cobra, late July 1944. The plan was to punch a hole in German defenses with overwhelming aerial bombardment. American bombers dropped thousands of tons of explosives on a narrow sector. It worked, but with a terrible price. The bombs fell short. Entire companies of the U.S. 30th Infantry Division were obliterated by friendly fire. General Leslie McNair, one of the highest-ranking officers in the U.S. Army, was killed instantly. Survivors described men blown apart not by the enemy, but by their own side. The path was cleared, yes. The German lines broke. But for the men who walked through the wreckage, stepping over the charred remains of comrades, victory was forever tainted. This is the paradox of war. The greater the triumph, the deeper the scars carried by those who make it possible. Statistics tell one story. Over 425,000 Allied and German casualties in the Battle of Normandy. But numbers flatten reality. Take Lieutenant Charles Shea, a Penobscot Native American medic on Omaha Beach. He pulled drowning men from the surf, carried the wounded under machine gun fire, worked until his arms gave out. He lived, but survival came with a burden. Why me? He asked for decades. Why not the others? Historians call this survivor's guilt. Soldiers carry it long after the flags are folded. Psychiatrist Abram Kardiner, who studied veterans after both world wars, described men haunted not by what they suffered, but by what they did, or failed to do, to others. And then there's the invisible wound. In World War II, it was called battle fatigue. In World War I, shell shock. Today we call it PTSD. By any name, it is the hidden cost that follows veterans home, staining their marriages, their children, their communities. Letters written by Normandy veterans decades later still shake with the weight of memories they could not bury. One man wrote simply, "I died in France. Only my body came back." But the cost of victory is not paid only by soldiers. Normandy was home to nearly 3 million French civilians. As the Allied armies advanced, they unleashed not only liberation but devastation. Cities like Caen, Saint-Lô, and Cherbourg were reduced to rubble. Entire neighborhoods flattened by artillery and airstrikes. By August 1944, an estimated 20,000 French civilians were dead, killed by the very forces meant to free them. British historian Anthony Beevor describes Saint-Lô after Allied bombing as a place of death, a smell of corpses and silence. Liberation for many French families began not with joy, but with mourning. And yet these civilian dead rarely appear in the triumphant newsreels. They are the footnotes of victory, the hidden casualties that do not fit the narrative of triumph. By late August 1944, Paris was liberated. Eisenhower declared the campaign a success. Churchill toasted Allied bravery. The world celebrated, but beneath the cheers, the ledger of costs grew heavier. The 1st Infantry Division alone suffered nearly 7,000 casualties. The 4th Division lost over 5,000. Entire small towns in America and Britain saw their sons vanish, never to return. And those who did return found a society eager to celebrate victory, but reluctant to confront its shadow. Veterans were expected to resume normal life, to be silent about nightmares, tremors, and grief. Some turned to drink, some to violence. Some carried the weight quietly, their children only realizing decades later what battles their fathers still fought in their sleep. The cost of Normandy was not paid in 1944 alone. It was paid every year after, in broken families, in lost potential, in men who lived but never truly came home. So what does this reveal? That victory in war is never clean. It is never free. It is not measured only in land gained or enemies defeated. It is measured in cemeteries, rows upon rows of white crosses at Colleville-sur-Mer, where the wind off the Channel whistles through silence. It is measured in the lives of civilians who rebuild shattered towns, in the families who wait for a knock on the door, in the veterans who carry ghosts only they can see. Military historian John Keegan once wrote, "The purpose of battle is to impose one's will upon the enemy. But its reality is suffering, its product is grief. Victory may end wars, but its costs ripple outward across generations, across nations." When we speak of D-Day, we speak of courage, sacrifice, liberation. And all of that is true, but it is not the whole truth. The hidden cost of victory is silence. The things soldiers cannot say, the things nations choose not to remember. It is the understanding that even in triumph, something irreplaceable is lost. So next time we stand in front of a memorial, or watch black and white reels of cheering crowds, let us remember the shadows that linger just beyond the frame. The soldiers who returned broken, the civilians buried in unmarked graves, the families that never healed, because in the end, the true measure of victory is not only what was won, but what was lost forever. Wars end, but their echoes don't. The hidden cost isn't counted in bullets, it's counted in the lives that never came home, and the memories buried to protect the idea of victory. If stories like this remind you that history still bleeds, subscribe, share, and let it be remembered. Because the dead can't speak, but we still can,